Do Sonic games need a story? A story, a serious story, a lighthearted story, what have you. It's just a cartoony blue hedgehog fighting a fat doctor's robots who is named and looks like an egg. Sonic X Shadow Generations, particularly Shadow Generations' campaign, sparked this whole conversation of how much value narratives and stories are worth having in Sonic games. This whole topic's nothing new, it's been around for pretty much 2 decades more or less, and even in 2024, I'm seeing some say in full belief, Sonic doesn't need a story, whether serious, goofy, lighthearted, etc. But above all else, let me say this right now. Sonic doesn't need a story. We have games like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic Generations, to where we've had pretty straightforward and very simple plots for a Sonic game, and those have worked. Some had stories that were pretty superficial, you just got a beginning and an end and that was it. Others take those ends and weave some kind of transition or multiple transitions towards that end goal, and you wound up with some kind of genuine narrative, alongside showing characters' personalities, what's going on, the stakes and scope gradually building higher and higher, and a series of events actually occurring. And this whole conversation arose from 2 spots on my end coaxing me making this video. One was simply Twitter coasting, with people tweeting about how Sonic stories embracing the cringiness of it all, or how the Sonic plots with substance in them are the most precious to them. And most of those types of tweets reaped immense praise and agreement. A couple people would disagree with these popular posts, and some would make their own, stating how, man, Sonic fans now really want Sonic 06 or Forces to happen again, huh? So pretty much the same conversation we've had pre and post Forces, so it got me thinking all over again. And the second spot was from my recent half-hour video talking about Sonic X Shadow Generations in pretty much every which way I could. Whether Generations needed a remaster or not, how much they could go about in adding extra content to Sonic Generations, how much are they going to put into Shadow Generations, how awesome Shadow Generations looks, and acknowledging the Shadow the Hedgehog game in 2024 and all this other stuff. Check it out if you haven't. Conflicted emotions and thoughts, but still looking forward to the remaster coming this fall. But talking about Generations in it, I mentioned how its plot was the weakest aspect of the game. Despite I love it, I felt it was pretty much a nothing plot, and how any form of a re-release could benefit from adding and expanding on the story it already has. Did I think then, and do I think now, they might do that for the remaster? Probably not. But adding something to Generations' story is one of multiple avenues I think Sonic Team and Sega could go for in making Generations a better experience. But I've gotten at least a couple comments, if not plenty more, agreeing with others based on likes, how Generations doesn't need any alteration to its story. We don't need Sonic games, or at least every Sonic game doesn't have to have a more serious or involved story when the game outside of that is good, and when it's not what people are looking for in Sonic games. So let me challenge that for this video. Let's start with Sonic Generations, to semi-spoil a portion of an eventual mass Sonic Generations review I want to do in the distant future. I agree it doesn't need a more layered story or serious story as it is at the end of it. I'll always believe it's one of the weakest Sonic games in terms of story. It's a pretty nothing narrative and probably the most surface level story out of literally every Sonic game out there. I think it's a contender. But for what's there, it gets the job done. They play it up as a mystery monster, only for Eggman to be commandeering the thing at the end. He just snatches a past version of himself for the big climax. But you celebrate Sonic's birthday, you have a monster bring Sonic back to past versions of stages throughout his past adventures. It's an anniversary game, purposefully trying to celebrate Sonic's overall mainline history above all else. You're going into Sonic Generations to celebrate Sonic's history and see how these revamped stages translate with the revived 2D classic gameplay, the currently newer Boost 3D gameplay, and the new remade level design to accompany both styles. Every time I bring up Generations' nothing plot, it's not me saying it's down there with some of Sonic's worst, like Lost World, Forces, Boom, Rise of Lyric, etc. The narrative was probably the last thing on Sonic Team's mind at the time, and they wanted to focus on the gameplay above all else, which was never something I'm trying to underplay or lambast them for, when I believe it has some of the best design and levels for the Boost. Plus, the main fault Genesis' story has nothing to do with any plot holes, mischaracterizations, poor new characters, poor writing, etc. I think Genesis' writing is fine, it's okay, the jokes they do have are cute and they work. At worst, it's just a thing you don't react to or care about often, and you know from the get-go, it's not trying to play itself up more as anything grander or deeper, as the game pretty much gives off that vibe from the start. But compared to other Sonic games where there are bad characterizations, jokes, stories, and other details, Generations doesn't really screw up anything it has as it is. It's around either the upper-lower half of Sonic games in terms of story and plot, if not smack dab in the middle, at least in my opinion, we'll see in due time. I love Generations because the gameplay is just that solid on all fronts, but I do bring up how nothing it is story-wise, because I don't just unironically really love some Sonic games that have those deeper stories, but because I think a stronger story would make Generations an even better experience, making an already great game even that much better. It's an anniversary title that lunges Sonic into previous levels from his past games on his birthday. Already right there, you have a concept, but all the game does is string you along with these cutscenes in between you clearing these levels, along the lines of, "Happy birthday, Sonic! Whoa, mystery monster! Where are we? Man, that place sure looks familiar. Whoa, there's another me! I think we're going through time and space. Let's keep going. We're making pretty good progress." That is literally every single cutscene and interaction that isn't the final boss. The one time they do any cutscene pondering any specific level in any major retrospection is Chemical Plant, the only level they ever do this for. Like, it's Sonic's birthday. Since it's going by the logic because it's the anniversary of when Sonic 1 dropped, by proxy, that means it's Eggman's birthday. Make it so Eggman's jealous that Sonic's birthday is the one that's celebrated and not his. It's a goofy motivation for Eggman, but it fits his character so well on top of matching the anniversary theme, making him want to go back to undo his past mistakes on a day where you reflect your own history. He would be that petty and selfish to mess with Sonic's birthday like that. The Time Eater being this entity Eggman stumbles upon in space is a whatever thing. Here's something I cooked up in my head. Since it's off the heels of Colors' ending, where he's drifting in space, why not make it a sole singular Nega Wisp, the purple Frenzy Wisp from Colors, that Eggman harnessed the most into his Nega Wisp armor, and part of the reason, a secondary catalyst that caused the explosion that nuked the space theme park. And the last one happened to be stashed in either the Eggmobile or with Cubot, when he was trying to catch some of the Wisps early on in that game and screwing up. This is the one time he did something Eggman wanted. And the Chaos Emeralds were absent as a plot device in Colors. All the Wisps besides this one are pretty much gone. Eggman deciding to reharness the Wisp's power using this singular one, and both gain some insurance on making effective use, as well as making do with having no more Wisps to work with. He uses the Chaos Emeralds to perfect Chaos Control and thwart Sonic once and for all. Chaos Control was this thing in Sonic 06 for time travel. You could bring that back here. I've seen some Sonic fans like Garrulus64 rewriting Sonic Generations' story, and I won't go over his suggestions. You can watch his content to find out for that. It's his ideas after all. But the Nega Wisp remnant as the basis for Time Eater, which they are similar in design and power somewhat, I came up with myself. I might concoct a plot entirely of my own ideas and stuff for Generations for a future video, and there are plenty of other Sonic fans that have come up with numerous ways to make Generations' story more fleshed out. But I've seen a few claim there isn't any wasted potential with Gens' story, and I think that's simply not true at all. You have a concept shown tied to the franchise's history, and all it does is string along the characters in a way for the player to experience these older levels in a fresher way, and nothing else. It's doing the bare minimum with that concept, adding unbelievably little to the characters and overall world it has. That's quite literally what missed potential is. Generations' story underutilizes the time travel and revisiting past concepts narratively pretty considerably, and the focus or vision of the developers or writers doesn't take away from that. It's just a means to an end while doing almost nothing with having so many Sonic characters be saved or tied to these stages or as bosses. This mystery monster only to rug pull it as Eggman in the end, which was pretty obvious to begin with. And I do believe while Generations has value just from its gameplay alone, it could be an even more standout Sonic game than just a glorified best of if it had more to its narrative, even by a little bit. And I really don't think it's wrong or overreaching for people to want or desire such out of Generations when Sonic's delivered numerous stellar stories and character writing before. But that's the thing. When people genuinely talk about Generations or Sonic as a whole, and the statement of Sonic not really needing a story being brought up half the time, at least some of the times when people bring this up, when talking about the bad with bad Sonic games, the bad with good Sonic games, or mediocre ones, sometimes when the statement's brought up, Sonic doesn't need to have a story, or synonymous descriptions of Sonic being a cartoony hedgehog, and Eggman being comedic, and the robot designs, and the out there settings, and all of this other stuff. It often reads and sounds less like people echoing Sonic not really needing stories sometimes, and echoing more Sonic shouldn't have a story. Of course, discourse, discussion, online communication can completely blur people's intent. There's objectively people that say the former, the title of this video, and do mean it by definition, like I was saying and agreeing with earlier with no extra implication. But there was a period during the 2010s and even late 2000s where we had critics and fans express immense distaste for Sonic games attempting deeper plots and character, no matter how fantastic or ass its execution was. Enough of Sonic's stupid animal friends. Remember when Sonic games used to be simple, pure fun about going fast? What's with all the bullshit about Hedgehog clones and heart-wrenching stories with all these characters, dumb animal or human? I just want a straightforward, simple, and standard Sonic experience, and that shouldn't be hard to ask. Like, it wouldn't shock me if there were plenty of Sonic fans that still do believe that sort of thing, as that was Sonic Team and Sega's mindset developing Sonic games from Colors to Lost World. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that. We all prefer one type of Sonic game over another for one reason or another. Gameplay style, writing, story, etc. We all prefer any Sonic media one way or another, and I think that's fair and just. Although, for those who don't care about a story in Sonic, good or bad story, if the gameplay's good, you can always just skip the cutscenes whenever. No one's forcing you not to do so if possible, if you don't want Sonic stories at all. I'm just saying. But the implication of it shouldn't have story, I completely disagree with. A lot of times this argument or discussions brought up often feels like it's played for semantics more than anything else. And even when Sonic doesn't need a story all in all, again, semantics, I still and will always believe a story, some type of substantial narrative, is a net benefit to any video game no matter what. This isn't my first romp discussing Sonic stories and stories in video games, period. I've made videos discussing both topics separately, and both can be interlinked in general as well as this video's general purpose. But if you saw the narratives in general gaming video, you'll know all game companies and developers should strive for a good gameplay experience. That's why we play games to begin with. But narrative carries almost as much, if not just as much weight, as a good gameplay experience. Depending on the series and franchise, it matters even more than the gameplay. Even for games with bad stories, any story is an extra piece of a video game. It gives anything an extra appeal, full stop. Whether the core plot, character moments, character writing, interactions, how these events affect the world and cleaning them up changes the world for the better in different ways afterwards. It makes the experience, these characters and worlds, infinitely more interesting than being one note and static. And you can 100,000% chalk this personal belief up to me not playing enough games, because I can list off 6 franchises max that I know with near full confidence. Any other gaming series or game in general is like at best triple that with less confidence. I do not play enough games to tell or see, but it often feels disingenuous to think Sonic shouldn't have a story or shouldn't even try half the time. Much less because he's a fictional fast hedgehog. Kirby, he's this baby pink puffball that can copy other beings and monsters, and not only can some Kirby games and stories get utterly ridiculous, Kirby's lore can get insanely layered and serious when you look for it, and this applies to most of his games. Kingdom Hearts plays itself with a serious and lighthearted face, and it's one of the most beloved RPGs because of the way it sets itself up. Regardless of how many write off how much some characters or plots make no sense, people love it anyways. Conversely, The Legend of Zelda is Nintendo's flagship action-adventure series that's also their primary flagship story franchise. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess went for very serious, broodier themes, and the games are immensely beloved in popular video games, not just because of the gameplay, but because they went for more serious and layered storytelling. Skyward Sword is a much more lighthearted Zelda, is also more controversial as far as mainline Zeldas go, but the most cherished aspect of the game is the character writing, the story of Skyward Sword. And then you get to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda's current magnum opuses, the largest and most elaborate games in the franchise, some of the biggest games in the entire industry figuratively and literally, and the most common criticism and low point a lot of people have with both titles, something Zelda is commonly beloved for, is the story of it all. And don't get it twisted, both games have some solid character interactions and stuff from a writing perspective, but millions agree it doesn't hold a candle in a narrative writing sense as previous Zeldas. Those two are again the peaks of Zelda for a lot of people, and rightfully so, but not giving it enough density or focus to the characters and overall stories of those games still leaves us from giving more people the closest thing to the perfect Zelda experience on every single front imaginable. And what's my channel? Super Mario T. What's my favorite franchise ever? It's a Mario, a very cartoony IP, the most gameplay above all else franchise you could ever probably think of. Mario is always about gameplay above all else. Everyone knows that. but some of his most beloved and cherished titles are because they went and gave more of an effort on fleshing out the characters and events. The story. Super Mario Galaxy is an insanely popular Mario game in a lot of Mario fans' top 5s. And one of the major components of that is the general atmosphere and stakes Galaxy 1 thrusts onto Mario, as well as introducing Rosalina and giving us a heart-wrenching and effective, appealing backstory. Longtime subscribers and viewers to this channel have known this forever, but Paper Mario's near entire appeal was always the story aspect of everything. Paper Mario 64 takes the same overused Bowser kidnaps Peach plot and crafts the most engaging and well-constructed version of that plot because of how they characterize Bowser, how they characterize Peach, how she's aiding Mario while stuck, how his actions affected the greater Mushroom Kingdom and all of the kingdom's inhabitants, a bunch of new characters, clever and timeless writing. It's the most plot-dense, traditional Mario story you're ever going to get. Thousand Year Door, even more new characters and entirely different adversaries, a different story, different twists, different locations, just more of what made 64 a fantastic game, but even more different and out there. Super Paper Mario, that game's entire appeal, pretty much, is the story of the game, and the villains and their ties to one of the main characters in Tippy. Mario and Luigi also plays with more serious and dire stakes affecting the Mushroom Kingdom and other kingdoms, and they crank that cartoony comedy up to 11, and it's some of the best Mario adventures you're ever going to get because of that. You got Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, Mario Odyssey, Mario Wonder, Mario Strikers, games that play themselves more seriously, that try and mess with the characters we know and love in a fashion more interesting and unexpected than what we're used to in a gameplay sense and a writing, character, or narrative sense. What I'm saying is, Mario thrives with this current gameplay above everything approach. But Mario has not only had his cake and ate it too with having a story and being able to succeed without much of any, he's had two different cakes and ate both successfully. Mario had both goofy and unserious stories and higher stakes, more serious stories and sub-stories. And in my opinion, he looks 100 times cooler than if he never had them. Not just because a lot of them are well executed and add to the Mario characters in Mario World, but also because Mario is immensely cartoony, unorthodox, and illogical in general, and especially more than Sonic ever is. And you have so many immensely more popular IPs or stories about monkey men martial artist aliens fighting other aliens, a guy trying to kill his father by starting a third world war, or a 17-year-old made of rubber wanting to be king of the pirates. They embrace the wacky, the cringe, and when Sonic does it too, I not only think it's not really that cringe, if at all, it's part of Sonic's appeal that attracts more to him and the series. So I can never disagree more or think it can't make any less sense than it already doesn't when it's too cringy or too much for Sonic to get more serious or a heavier focus on his plots, when you don't hear how much it turns people off when other franchises do it. Not only that, I'm sorry, dog. Do you remember the franchise we're talking right now? It's no problem for those who prefer less serious or straightforward Sonic plots, but some of Sonic's most successful and most of his most beloved games focus heavier on that story and narrative. Sonic Adventure 2, 8 million copies, gave us one of, no, the most popular character, because they leaned into giving him an effective backstory. The overall story of Sonic Adventure 2, an anniversary title like Generations was one of the riskiest, layered, and dense stories Sonic's ever had, and it's been one of the most popular and cherished titles because of that and other reasons. Sonic Adventure, similar deal. Not as dense in story as its sequel, 9.5 million copies sold, but it elaborated on the lore surrounding Knuckles, the Echidna tribe. We got introduced to Chaos, giving character growth in Tails and Amy, and one of the best character stories in E102 Gamma. Both adventure titles got dozens of millions of people into Sonic's world and the Sonic characters because of this. Sonic and the Black Knight is pretty much only beloved because of the story and writing. That pretty much is Black Knight's identity to most Sonic fans, with or without its gameplay. A lot of people also forget Sonic 3 and Knuckles had a cool story behind it too. It was the first Sonic game with level transitions, these seamless segues to each act, sometimes a transition in the middle of an act, giving more context to the actual adventure, the story happening in the game. Angel Island bursting into flames preceding Act 2, Knuckles letting Eggman wreak havoc on the island unbeknownst of Eggman's obvious trickery, Launch Base Zone, being a temporary base Eggman built upon crashing to Angel Island. The Death Egg being on this journey from crashing to gradually being tossed back up, to crashing down again in a volcano by Lava Reef Zone, to reactivating it with laser eyes to launch it back into space. Eggman zapping Knuckles, Knuckles understanding he was manipulated, and tying up ends with and entrusting Sonic to finish the job, Angel Island, the Master Emerald. It felt like Sonic's world was more realized and united than it was before. Like Sonic's done more involved stories before throughout the entire series, even the more straightforward or lighter ones like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Mania, Colors, Heroes, etc. And of course the serious, intense, and intricate stories like Black Knight, 06, Shadow, Adventure 2, etc. People have always looked for story in Sonic from the very beginning. We have millions of fans that adore many Sonic characters and games because they are Sonic games that put that greater emphasis on the story. And that right there is another reason why I find the notion or reason either disingenuous sometimes or questionable at best. We've had Sonic games do both lighthearted and serious narratives, and they've bolstered Sonic's charm in a lot of people's eyes from both types. Sonic stories and Sonic character writing is part of the appeal. Even Sonic Frontiers' director thinks the same. He's capable of doing both. Sonic can have his cake and eat both cakes just like Mario. Sonic Unleashed, that's like the primary example of lighthearted stories for Sonic in my opinion. It's not as serious or thought-provoking as Adventure 2, Black Knight, or even Adventure 1, but it offers a high-stakes plot without playing too heavily into the gravity of the world being split apart. It's common Sonic vs. Eggman shenanigans, but it's Sonic's friendship with Chip, and Chip's character and memory retrieval alongside all the NPCs and characters you meet and learn about, going to each continent that adds that life to Sonic Unleashed, that spice to Sonic and his world in general. Sonic Riders, the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Heroes pretty much, the Sonic Advance trilogy, Sonic Rush, these are all Sonic games that do play into an easy, lighter Sonic plot with some substance and weight without going too ham or serious into it. But again, Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow, his backstory and reason for trying to eradicate humanity, the Biolizard, the Space Colony arc, Maria, Gerald Robotnik, Tails' character growth when confronting Eggman, Eggman's character and SA2 being the closest he pretty much ever got to killing Sonic. It went the hardest the franchise ever went at that point in tension, darker tone, somber writing. Like the gameplay's iffy for some when you look at all of Adventure 2, but it's pretty easy to see why Adventure 2 clicks with millions of Sonic fans because of how it's set up. Even Sonic 3 and Knuckles, like I mentioned earlier. Sonic Multimedia as well supports this. The longest running comic of a video game is based on Sonic. Both the Archie comics and the IDW comics have some of the literal best characterization and writing the franchise has ever seen. Sonic the Hedgehog, Tangle and Whisper, Treasure Team Tango, Episode Shadow, Shadow Fall, Episode Metal, the Sonic Universe comics or the Archie comics from issue 252 onwards, you get immensely good stuff out of the Sonic cast. It's insane. These comics do far more with the Sonic characters than Sega will ever allow Sonic Team to do in the games. I swear to God. I've had friends be unable to emphasize to me how insanely good the Sonic comics are, and after peeking some of them a little bit before making this video, I can't emphasize enough either. They are indeed that unbelievably good and would make a great staple of an example on how you should approach Sonic characters and stories, whether we're talking the Archie comics or the IDW ones, especially when they've consistently managed to deliver on multiple fronts like this for 30 years pretty much. Sonic X plays itself more serious by season 3 significantly and is the height of the show for most people for good reason and still has lightheartedness in the first 2 seasons. On the opposite end, Sonic Boom, the cartoon, is low-key a top 3 Sonic cartoon because of how actually very funny it is. It plays with the meta humor and works because it's done in a way with a spin-off universe with these characters and doesn't take itself seriously because it knows it doesn't have to pretty much most if not all the time, and it knows when to take itself more serious for the season finales. The Sonic movies too, I'm not really going to give Sonic 1 that much credit, but Sonic 2, 100%. When yeah, it's a different interpretation of Sonic as a character, I think it's an interpretation that works. it is enjoyable, and it still gave us great characterizations in Knuckles, Tails, and the stakes raising with Robotnik using the Death Egg robot. Sonic 2 is still a great Sonic movie, don't at me. And I don't really care about this and other examples being media where you have to make more interesting or engaging stories, especially regarding how insanely good the comics are. It's all Sonic media that gives us a story, several more serious, edgier stories with a bunch of Sonic's dumb animal friends, and does a really damn good job at it the vast majority of the time. So not only across multiple Sonic games do we get multiple Sonic stories with either more serious and darker plots and themes, as well as more lighthearted, normal, less stakes stories. We get a lot of that in the comics, multiple TV shows, and even movies. So I'm sitting there thinking, really? People still think we really don't need Sonic stories or greater explorations into more possibilities for plots, characters, motivations, and whatnot? Are you kidding me? Sonic not needing a story often just feels like semantics for the sake of it. Cause yeah, you don't need something deep or unserious or anything to make a Sonic game. Any game for that matter, it goes without saying. I hear this plenty with Mario already, despite he's done deeper and more nuanced stories. But do you really think it'd be a better game or general experience if it had no substance? I really don't think so. I fully believe you get some of Sonic's best when he does embrace some narrative substance, and that right there is the one thing that makes a lot of Sonic stories, in my opinion, across a plethora of Sonic media, at worst, have some fun elements, at best give us riveting character moments and adventures you do not get anywhere else, and on average, narratives that work and are entertaining. It's that they have substance. A lot of people weren't as ecstatic towards Sonic Colors, despite its success, because it had a very bare-bones story and mediocre humor. Colors is aging worse for more and more people by the day for this and the level design, but even from the start, there were plenty of people that were disappointed it didn't offer any sort of substance to its plot, especially when Unleashed and Black Knight came briefly before. Sonic Generations is still pretty much immensely beloved, but deadass, the only gripe people have with it is wishing it had a genuine story. It's the only turnoff for most people. And we're seeing more and more people admit they fell off around the early to mid 2010s because Sonic stopped focusing as much on stories and writing with substance. Lost World's one of the most hated Sonic games because it has such a bad story and bad writing, how one-note the Deadly Six are, how obnoxious Sonic and Tails are, Tails' flanderization, the story doing nothing with Sonic teaming up with Eggman halfway through. Forces has more stuff going on, but it has almost zero substance because of how badly written Infinite is, how they portrayed the stakes of the game, Eggman's empire, Tails' flanderization again. Like, Forces didn't know when to take itself seriously and when to take itself like a joke, and it attempted to do both at the same time while executing it miserably. It had substance that was meaningless, and you can't really say that about most other Sonic games. And it did not help when Sega went and changed everything about a lot of modern Sonic stories. Pontac and Graf's influence may leave questions as well as their overall influence to Sonic, primarily the localized characterization still being an issue. But the Japanese versions of Colors, Forces, Lost World, a ton of Sonic games are dramatically different from how characters are written and portrayed worldwide. Point being, the poor stories and characterizations of these games aren't at least entirely Pontac and Graf's fault, when the core story and events of these games don't change much, and when Sega's also pulling strings in some Sonic games in their stories. However, Shadow's entire character arc and story enhance Sonic Adventure 2. Everything that happens throughout this game and how the characters progress, or at least Knuckles, enhances Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Characters, attitudes, personalities, stories, backstories, etc. all enhance Sonic Adventure, Sonic and the Secret Rings, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Rush, Rush Adventure, Frontiers, even 06 and Shadow the Hedgehog for some. And for 06, another anniversary title, say whatever you want about the game, the one constant highlight people had with 06 was Shadow's campaign, which had an interesting story and premise surrounding Shadow's growth up until that point. Rouge and Omega's camaraderie with Shadow and dealing with Mephiles. And regardless of whether you want to put 06 or Shadow in this whole equation or not, factor pretty much any other mainline game or spin-off, other multimedia Sonic stuff, it gives the audience a greater investment and attachment to these worlds and characters. Giving us nuanced characters and interesting plots fleshes out Sonic's world just as it would for any other franchise. It's the spice of fiction. It's what gives people in real life such a fondness and enjoyment because it gives fiction more depth, more to dig up and explore. It gives more substance. And when it's meaningful and adds to a character, a world, a narrative, anything, all the better. And it's precisely why pretty much everyone is excited for Shadow Generations as well, because not only does it look extremely gorgeous visually, and it's taking Sonic Generations' concept, just applying it to Shadow, but it's adding Black Doom again, Biolizard, it's adding elements and concepts from Shadow the Hedgehog, and it's confirmed to be giving Shadow a more involved, nuanced, and substantial story. The complete antithesis to Sonic Generations. It's now a remaster that seems to be trying to balance both, which is exciting to everyone. You can have more grounded and realistic settings and cartoonier, more fantastical worlds as well, characters and whatnot. I prefer the more grounded and realistic Sonic stuff compared to the over-the-top cartooniness of, for instance, Lost World, but Sonic's another whimsical, fictional world that can balance and pull off both, just like its writing and story. And to avoid going ham on making every Sonic story serious and edgy, because you don't want to run the risk of that formula getting stale or numb, you can avoid that by making more games and stories more lighthearted, less serious, and more aloof, like Unleashed, Heroes, or even Colors does. You can give a sense of normalcy and letting us connect with the characters on a more tranquil level by giving a more straightforward, tame, or even goofy narrative, as long as there's substance, which is the key distinction. Colors has some, but not enough for a lot of people. Generations has none. Lost World pretty much has meaningless substance. Forces' substance is completely meaningless, so these two can be equated to none. And you can balance Sonic being serious and Sonic being lighthearted to maintain a balance, some variety and fun, in both ways for both the audience and the Sonic world. There are a plethora of fictional stories, cartoon, gaming, movie, etc. that take themselves seriously and wound up as hallmarks in media and fiction because of that. And I don't see any point in gatekeeping Sonic in trying to do so, especially when he's done so in dozens of instances with plenty of success and praise. Again, there's nothing wrong if you prefer the simpler stories akin to Colors, Lost World, and whatnot. Preferences are a thing, but multiple Sonic games, and especially the comics and other shows and movies, have shown Sonic can take itself more seriously in lighter and darker fashions, and they just inherently add to Sonic's appeal in far more positive ways than negative, even in the bad Sonic games or bad Sonic media. I've believed this with so many other fictitious media across games and shows, and I still believe so with Sonic. And you can do both. You can holy shit 2 cakes and eat both with lighter and darker stories if you have substance at the end of it. Substance and balance for the lighthearted and deeper. That's the key. And there's nothing wrong with people wanting more substance in their Sonic stories anywhere, and it's certainly still worth giving a shot for future Sonic titles. That's my 2 cents on the topic. Thank you very much for watching. I promise, unless there's a Nintendo Direct, the next video is my humongous Invincible Season 1 review. It's been stuck in editing for a while. I'm sorry. I'm not done yet. It's gonna be really good, I promise. But of course, I'll swing back around with some Sonic content to come in the future. Stay super.